Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tatho Jaya Mudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 25, entitled Krishna Lives Govardhan Hill, Text 2. Please repeat after me. Ganam samvartakam nama meghanam chantakarinam Indra prachodayat kruddho vakyam chahe shamanyuta Ganam samvartakam nama meghanam chantakarinam Indra prachodayat kruddho vakyam chahe shamanyuta Ganam samvartakam nama meghanam chantakarinam Indra prachodayat kruddho vakyam chahe shamanyuta Meghanam chantakarinam Indra prachodayat kruddho vakyam chahe shamanyata Ganam samvatakam nama Meghanam chantakarinam Indra prachodayat kruddho Vakyam chahe shamanyata. Mataji. Ganam vatakam nama Meghanam chantakarinam Indra prachodayat kruddho Vakyam chahe shamanyata. Ganam, the group. Samvartakam Nama, named Samvartaka. Meghanam, of clouds. Cha, and Antakarinam, who effect the end of the universe. Indra, Prachodayat, sent forth. Kruddha, angry. Vakyam, words. Cha, and. Aha, spoke. Ishamani, falsely thinking himself the supreme controller. Uta, indeed. Translation and purport by disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation. Angry Indra sent forth the clouds of universal destruction known as Samvartaka. Imagining himself the supreme controller, he spoke as follows. Purport. The word Isha Mani here is very significant. Indra arrogantly considered himself to be the Lord, and thus he exhibited the typical attitude of a conditioned soul. Many thinkers in the 20th century have noted the exaggerated sense of individual prestige characteristic of our culture. Indeed, writers have even coined the phrase, the me generation. Everyone in this world is more or less guilty of the syndrome called Ishamana, or proudly considering oneself the Lord. Om Agyantimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadhati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Shabha Shri Vishakhan Tamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Apta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishubhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyasya Kripa Sindhuva Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, we're actually very fortunate that such a great personality as Indra, and he is a very great personality, is one of the most important demigods, and he has allowed himself to be eternally used to demonstrate to us both the glories of a Vaishnava and also sometimes when we slip. Actually, oftentimes when we hear the stories of Indra, we generally hear only when he's slipped up. And, he's chastised, he comes shamefaced, on his knees, and then he has to kind of make amends. But if you take the synopsis of the whole, of all his episodes, primarily, as yesterday His Holiness Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj mentioned, that the difference between a devotee and a demon is primarily that the devotee, when he's in difficulty, comes to the Lord. So Indra, one of his greatest qualities is that even though he sometimes, because of the opulence he possesses, becomes extremely forgetful of his position momentarily and acts in a way which kind of makes him humiliated for eternity. But he more than recovers by actually accepting the humiliation of a greater humiliation of coming back to the Lord and begging forgiveness, and in such a joyful way. So we have to learn from these stories the idea of the Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, that we see the pastimes of Krishna is, of course, Krishna's incomparable compassion, his mercy, in such a way that he lovingly brings his devotees back to the track. So the underlying point is that the basic the root cause of all the bondage is this is false pride, false ego. So I never understood that there is a difference between false ego and real ego. When we say somebody's egoistic, we generally think that he thinks too much of himself. But the first thought I had was that then we should not have any ego. But understanding that actually everyone has an ego, everyone has an identity, and the real ego is to understand our constitutional position, that we are the servant of the Lord, and that we are here to please the Lord, that He is the doer, He is the controller, He is the enjoyer, and we are meant to be enjoyed, and in that we gain great happiness. And actually that is the nature of the soul, that we see pleasure, we get pleasure in how we serve devotees. Just yesterday we had a get-together here in the temple to, for the first time, it was that all the volunteers for Janmashtami were called, just to reciprocate and give the thanks to them. Almost 400 or 500 devotees come for volunteer service. So quite a few devotees spoke briefly, 2-3 minutes, and many of them said that this is the first time that they have got this whole day opportunity like this. And everyone felt that it was such a pleasurable occasion, mainly because they could, in spite of going through fasting and nirjal, etc., they were very happily occupied in serving, and they forgot about their own miseries and difficulties. So we can actually experience it. Even coming on a Sunday morning and here, for a person who's not familiar or connected to a temple or spiritual activities, it is something completely mind-boggling that Sunday they look forward to just to completely, relax and do what you don't do on the other 6 days. Completely, let go. So perhaps you get up at 10 in the morning, or you get up early and go do various things, whatever. But the last thing in the world is to actually get up early and come to temple, or if you read Bhagavatam, hear Bhagavatam, etc. But then once we are familiar and we've come, we not only find it natural, but we find it pleasurable. So similarly, this is the conditioning of the mind. So how the mind is trained, it is depending on how we let the intelligence control it. And of the 8 elements, the 5 gross and the 3 subtle elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, and the 3 subtle elements, these are the 5 gross, and the subtle elements, the mind, intelligence, and false ego. These are the elements of the body, in which the earth is the most gross, and the false ego is the ego is the most subtle. So which means that actually the ego is more subtle than the intelligence. The mind is more subtle than fire, earth, water, fire, air, ether, in that descending order. And then even more subtle is the mind, then more subtle is intelligence, more subtle is the ego. Which means that even through our intelligence you cannot perceive the ego. You can only understand the symptoms of the behavior of and the manifestations of ego. But you can't actually perceive it because it through our intelligence. So that is why the example is given that it's just like the tumor, and you need a surgeon to remove the tumor. Same way here, the guru is the surgeon, and he removes the tumor of the false ego, because that is what is really covering covering the purity of the soul. Another beautiful example which comes in our Shastras very clearly explains how the principle works, how the false ego works, and how it is different than the uncontaminated soul. Is just like when on a rainy day you have the clouds covering the sun, so we feel that there is you can't see the sun, but actually the fact that you see the clouds is only because the source of light is the sun behind the clouds. So actually the source of the light is the sun, but the sun is behind the clouds, and that illuminates the clouds so that you see the clouds. Without that you won't even see the clouds. Same way the moon. The moon is also, when it's covered, sometimes you don't see the moon. You think the moon is not there, but actually you see the clouds are covering the moon, but actually the clouds are seen because of the illumination of the moon behind the clouds. So the cloud is compared to the false ego, and the sun or the moon is really the soul. So actually it's the consciousness, the pure soul is an uncontaminated form, it's pure consciousness which actually needs to be seen without the cloud of false ego. So our whole purpose, no matter who we are, where we are, what citizen we are, what background we have, every living entity has this, has a false ego as a biggest problem. And why? Because the source of all the basic manifestation of all our problems really is false pride. Because only through that, then you have the lust, anger, greed, envy, etc., which come from the basic principle of false pride. And false pride makes us misidentify, makes us think that who we are not, and we completely act on that basis. Just like Indra was acting on that basis temporarily. But minute he came back to his senses due to the kindness of the mercy of Krishna, who did it so lovingly. Or Lord Brahma when he stole the calves. So they do not see the minute the cloud is removed of ignorance or the temporary covering, and immediately they see the actuality. So we need to see and examine in our lives what are the kind of clouds that are there which block us from seeing what our real role is. And Bhakti, His Holiness Jayadat Maharaj had written an article many years ago in the Back to Godhead, Who's a Demon? Very beautiful article, which actually said that, first thing, most of us have heard stories of the Ramayana and Mahabharata when we grew up. So I would always picture, the demon would be a monstrous person, with teeth which are, at least 3 feet long and dark black hair and black eyes and so on. But he mentioned that actually a demon, he might be nicely suited, booted, might be a gentleman. Perhaps he's even in a dhoti, in a sari. So he may be one of us, perhaps. So basically the demon is only one who is envious of the Lord, who doesn't like the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the main difference. So we have to question as to whether we, coming to the temple, holding the bead bag is not only, that's an external manifestation which is also necessary, but that is not the way we judge ourselves as to whether we are, what we actually feel. That feeling will come, that feeling we need to examine as to when the Supreme Personality of Godhead brings His presence in many ways. And He brings it in ways which we do not know. So He's not going to bring it in sometimes it may happen, like in the case of Srila Prabhupada, that it was like a forcible recognition. Prabhupada didn't want to, his whole, we see from his entire life, and also when he went to the West, and his prayers in the Jaladut, he had no, he was not kind of planning that I am going to become famous. That was not at all his goal. He was only wanting to give Krishna consciousness, the bhakti, the science of bhakti to the fallen souls there. But then Krishna wanted to bring his presence up. So that maybe Krishna may want, but many times Krishna may give such challenges and difficulties, and we all go through that. In a span of our whatever lifespan we've seen, at least in our spiritual consciousness, now that we understand something of the philosophy, we will see a range of events happening. Life's drama unfolds practically every day. So many different scenes come. So we do see bad things, good things, bad events happening. Actually, the events are not bad. They're meant for our, that's the way we perceive it. But actually, they're meant for our benefit. How do we react in that event? That would be a manifestation of how much we believe in Krishna's presence. Do we lose control? Do we get, extremely agitated? If you go to see, sometimes, nowadays, I never read this 20, 30 years ago, but now it is often that we see, forget the West, where we see, there's no gun control, so that's common to hear that somebody takes a gun and goes and shoots 5 people or 10 people, and his hatred towards society or whatever. Even school children do that sometimes. But in India also you have this common fact of road rage. There's a term called road rage, that you're on the road and either you are in the car or in a vehicle, or suppose your vehicle just gets slightly knocked by a bus, and they just lose control, and then they stop the bus and get the bus conductor down and beat him, sometimes kill him. So this is happening. You read this. You can see that you just need a little bit of one little matchstick in a tinder box, and the whole thing is aflame. Everything just bursts. So actually, the agitation that is there, oftentimes we feel that, because our expectations are not met. See, we have expectations, and this is the fundamental principle of false ego is that we expect things to happen, and that when it does happen, then we get accustomed to it. Just like in Indra's case, he had so much of wealth, so we can actually, I would say, it is an understandable thing. Perhaps it's not what we would follow, but one can see because we can't even imagine the opulence, the power, the authority he has, the control he has. It just is not even, it's beyond our imagination. The kind of, and for thousands of years. And then, so sometimes you may temporarily forget, and then still he has the humility to come back. But we are not even in that level, and still we feel, we get so covered that by some success, for instance, and then if the success doesn't come, then the frustration comes out, it spills over. Or something that we were looking for, and then we see some injustice happening, perceived injustice, and then we just lash out, and it could be to our spouse, to our family, to our parents, to our relatives, it could be anyone. So, this doesn't spare even devotees. But the difference, as Indra has shown, is that the devotee understands that if he feels guilty, makes a mistake, he rectifies. That is the difference. The the demoniac mentality is such where he will never go to the Lord, because he is completely convinced of his powers, that he can rectify the situation. That if this problem has happened, I know how to do it. And in fact, the envy is so much that, and we see this in today, what we read in media and etc. That even the slightest tinge of any spirituality, and they just go berserk. They hate it. Anything of saffron or anything about religion, and they just hate it. It's so much pent up. And ironically, it is even more in the land of India, because as Prabhupada said, that you have the new crows and the old crows. So the new crows are those who have just tasted the Western concept, and they think the materialistic success, somebody who has made billions, is extremely worthy of emulation, while somebody who may not have anything is nobody. So that is why from childhood, when we talk of discipline, self-control, it is something which is necessary for us. All of us would agree that, that phrase which is said that spare the rod and spoil the child, where a parent who spoils the child by giving everything that the child wants is actually doing a great disservice, because then the child gets so used to getting what it wants that later on the child will, when grows up, of course the child is a small child, so the child cannot understand, it just demands, I want. It's the parent's duty to know when to give in, when not to give in, and there will be certain restrictions. Otherwise, no child would go to school, no child would, they only want to play. That will be the nature of the child. But to do something which it doesn't want is the parent's duty to gradually bring a kind parent will gradually somehow bring it round. Sometimes it may be acting a little harshly, a little strictly, sometimes, many times with kindness, etc. So that is the role Krishna plays. So the worst thing would be that if we get expectations which are met, and then we get used to it, then we continue to expect that this is the way it is going to be, and then I should get it. And if I don't get, then we cannot tolerate it. So that is why Krishna in his kindness many times creates situations when our expectations are not met. Ideally is if we come to a stage where we don't have expectations, that would be the ultimate. But till we reach that stage, we will have expectations even in our services. We want others to behave the way we want, or the way it should happen, because we want success from that service. We want this project to because I am a part of the project, I want to make this project work. So we feel it's done for Prabhupada, so the project must work, definitely. But this person is a hindrance, that person is a hindrance, this person has to do that way. So we get agitated if the person doesn't work the way we want, or we have a difference of opinion. And that's when the ego clashes take place. You can imagine extending it to intimate people, like for instance married couples. This manifestation of expectations, that is why we have so many divorces happening more and more now. We see it is far more now in the last 20, 30 years than it ever was. Of course, in the West, the percentages are staggering, but even here, in the eastern countries and in India, much more so in the cities. As we become urbanized, as we look at the West as a model, we're taking the worst of the habits, and rather than the good points that we could take. And in that, and you of course, you would not experience it, but you would read about it. You may have relatives, friends who are experiencing this. And divorces are the most so painful, so difficult, because if you live with someone for maybe 5, 10, 20, 30 years, and then the divorce courts are much worse than even murder courts, because it is so painful. See, physical pain you can bear a little bit, but when your ego is hurt, and when you're exposed in public and you're ripped apart, and it's really, really bad. It starts because when marriages take place, generally many love marriages are there. In the West, it's only love marriages practically. So they will start with, I can't live without you. And then eventually it ends with, I can't live because of you. So, it just, the same person who was so close to us and who we felt made our life so nice, and now we can't stand that person. So, this is again coming from the same situation where we become highly individualistic, selfish, egocentric, self-centered. So, this is the way, society has progressed over the last several hundred years, gradually. And many deep thinkers have actually pointed out that whether it is, we have paid the price economically, socially, personally, and certainly spiritually, wherein, the family concept, where at least, or a community concept was been broken and made into individual, totally individual oriented. It is a systematic approach. And in the West, even you can say the deterioration of the influence of the church has also been primarily because the leaders that the intellectuals, the establishment, the thinkers, have worked towards it, that they gradually, and it's happened over several centuries, that it's the individual, everything revolves around the individual. And that is why India is such an oddball. See, India doesn't fit into the world. Either they try to ignore it. For instance, when we read in the papers routinely, they will talk about, when talk of the leading religions, you never hear about any Indian religion, whether they call it Hindu or Vaishnav, You never read about any. You never. It'll always be Jews, Muslims, Christians. You never read about it because they just completely ignore it. Partly because India doesn't have the powers that have to put fear into others. You have to become strong, like the Chinese or the Middle East, to be able to make other people sit up. They may not like you, but they have to recognize you. But and the other part is that India's lot of India is still the old Bharat, which has the traditions, which has values, and which wants to live with that. For instance, the lack of total blind ambition. A lot of people don't have that here. And that's something which is against the grain of society today. What we are trained to do is to really go focus on a goal and that's it. We don't realize that suits many people. It doesn't matter what happens to our life, that for the next maybe 20, 30 years, we're totally slave and we forget the larger picture of who we are, why we've come here, what is our purpose, and suddenly we find ourselves that we're retired and now we are nobody and we have no thinking, we don't have any habits, we don't have any inclinations other than that, and suddenly what we thought was our life is gone. So this is not to say that we should not work hard. Obviously, this we have to, because that is again the nature of every person, that he needs to be occupied. He or she has to be mentally occupied, physically occupied, and it's a question of what our consciousness chooses to be. It is also not a matter of saying that just if you have a community or a family, that's the end of life. No, because we can see the negatives also. That if the Lord is not in the center, if the acceptance, as we said, that the basic bondage comes from the fact that we don't want to recognize Krishna as the doer. So if a family doesn't recognize that Krishna is the doer, enjoyer, and somehow our life is to be centered around it, then in which case even the family can be the bane, because we see so many families who one child may be interested in spirituality, and the family is, it's so-called pious. Also, they have basically values. They may be vegetarian, they may be living all that, but they cannot accept the fact that the child is, going to ISKCON or becoming serious, because their concept is very different. Their concept is that it is a way of life that I go on. Do everything has its compartments. I do my, ritual, and that's it. I go to the temple on Navratri. I will go, or I will go on this day, that day. Put my token. Sunday I'll go. But it should be only that, not more. Anything more means, you are out of balance, you are, etc. So, in other words, it's not a matter of family, or it's not a matter of hard work. But generally speaking, in India, the piety factor helped people to accept the spiritual progress. And we do see this, that, when Loknath Maharaj's, His Holiness Loknath Maharaj's Padayatra has gone through thousands of villages over the last, 30 years almost, and maybe more. And wherever the reception has been it's spontaneous and so high. Why? Because people recognize, they recognize the value of renunciation, they recognize a sannyasi, they recognize devotees. So they may have their own life, but it is broadly in conjunction with what they see. So therefore they feel very comfortable, and it comes naturally. And even in the cities, not only in this temple, not only in Mumbai, there's so many ISKCON temples. Not only ISKCON, there are other genuine religions also which are helping. But when they reach out, people do recognize. So India has a lot of this still. But my point is that the minute you keep the Lord out of the picture, then whether you have a family as an institution, whether you have a very disciplined organization, that way the mafia is very disciplined, most disciplined. They follow, you can trust them. Absolutely, you can trust them with $1 million, or you can trust them to shoot the other person and then he will go to jail for the rest of his life. That kind of trust you also have. But where is the Lord in the picture? So it is not a matter of, it is like honor among thieves. So, you can have your own circles, you can have your own, tight bonds, which is of no, because it is self-serving. Ultimately, it is for serving ourselves. So, it's amazing how we, how our behavior can change, that we can be very gentle, very kind, very nice, when it is conducive to such behavior serving our senses. And when it is not, then we are completely different. Totally, we can become totally different. Of course, one of the leading examples is Kans, when he was taking his sister Devki. He was so friendly. He went out of his way to express his love to his sister and brother-in-law. He was driving the chariot himself, being such a king. He stooped down, so-called, taking the reins of the chariot and carrying on. But the minute he heard the voice, the minute he heard that they could be my enemies, completely so, my enemies. So there was no question of anything else. It's just that anyone threatening me, anyone coming on my turf, it means that we are completely, then everything, all rules are out. There's no question. And this is the principal rule. Then the real me comes out. Right? The sword comes out. And so we could be also, we need to examine ourselves. I mean, when I say me, I don't think you, but I'm saying in general, we internally, ultimately, we have to examine ourselves in the context of what changes that can happen and what are the things which still bring us down. Today, this morning, we may have had a major argument, or we may have let go of a way, or maybe yesterday, or maybe day before, and behaved in a way temporarily which could be defined as blindly angry, or could be, you can say, demoniac, by Jayadvaita Maharaj's definition, by the scriptural definition. It could be, but it is not. But a devotee is someone who will turn to the Lord and understand that. If a tendency has been there from childhood, and somebody has been doing it very often, and gradually tries to minimize it, and gradually reduces it, and then that is progress. So what is needed from a devotee? How do we counteract it? The most important thing is that we need to develop humility and renunciation. These are the two pillars on which our spiritual progress can really work. And this is something, again, which is not external. It is not a matter of dress or show. Though there is some value to external, but it is minimal. The more important is the consciousness change that needs to, and humility we talked of already, that actually the minute we accept Krishna as in the center, automatically our judgment of various things will be on the basis of real pride. When we talked of false ego and real ego, the real pride, the real ego, a devotee has real ego. Means he is very proud of, aren't we proud of our Guru Maharaj, our Srila Prabhupada, the six Mahajans, the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? When we hear it, our hearts, we feel we belong to this family. We're so happy. So we do have pride. So that pride is very well, because that actually embellishes our constitutional position. Our constitutional position that we are actually the servants in the right line. And that not any credit to us, because it has been it is purely out of compassion and mercy of the Lord, causeless mercy, that we have been given this opportunity. But having given this opportunity to progress on that, we do feel pride. So we are not devoid of it. But the minute we identify it towards ourselves, then the whole situation changes. And then that's the slight variation and everything changes. It's like a slight detour. But then if we don't come back on the main road, then that detour can completely go tangentially. That is where the real danger is. That so our activities that we do, even if we are following the regulative principles, chanting, whatever we do externally, we have to examine what is our motivation. What is it that really makes us tick? What pleases us? Is it that even our services, that at the end of it, we want the recognition. We want people to say, we crave for it, that somebody does notice that I've done something. Even though you go out of the way to make sure that people don't see it, but not so much out of the way that somebody doesn't notice. Is that the feeling that we finally, or is it that, like Prabhupada? And Prabhupada went, he could have, he had 2 heart attacks, he could have left his body any time. When he went to America, he could have left his body in America without having, for 1 year he was, he had no devotees, no disciples. he had no expectations of anything. He just had one goal, to please his spiritual master who had left this world 30 years ago. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had left this world 30 years ago and given instructions on 2 or 3 occasions and go to the West. And in fact, he told him on the first time he met him. So the instruction was given in 1922, and then 1966 he went. So 44 years later. So obviously it was completely deeply internal. So this is a living perfect example for us as to how we go about our goals. That we may have to swallow our pride in many occasions. And when I'm saying this, it's easy to say it. I'm saying it because I know what we should not be doing. So but it is only a reminder to all of us as to how we need to. This is the benefit of reminding us. When we discuss in Srimad Bhagavatam classes or in satsangs, lectures, in preaching programs. This whole purpose is whatever is discussed, it focuses our attention to Krishna, Krishna's devotees, and then it's not theory. It is the real practice. It is the real us. Because life can end any time. At the same time, what have we done so far? What is our record? And suddenly you hear something which reminds us that this I should not do, this I should do, I'm lacking here, I should do this. So this is the purpose, and that's why association is critical. So as I said, the 2 critical things that needed humility and renunciation, and to achieve this, the association of sadhus is paramount, absolutely critical. Because otherwise, all our whatever we have been blessed with by the Lord, it's very difficult for us to get away from. Like Queen Kunti says in Srimad Bhagavatam in her prayers that all these attributes that we have are actually real dangers for the obstacles for spiritual life, like wealth, beauty, intelligence, education. So this could be an obstacle if we see it as our creation and we forget that who has given us and what is the purpose. And she says that Krishna is the property of the materially exhausted or the impoverished, which means that tvam akinchana gocharam. It doesn't mean that one has to be physically totally poor. King Prataprudra was the king of Orissa, and Rupa and Sanatan Goswami were the 6 Goswamis, among the 6 Goswamis. They both were tvam akinchana gocharam, because they were living their life that nothing is mine, everything is the Lord's. So whether the material assets have any value or no value, whatever is attributes that are there, whether it's intelligence, whether it is beauty, whether it's fame, whether it's wealth, everything can be used, dovetailed. Whatever we have, see, Krishna sees what we are giving, not he sees what we hold back. So whatever we give, he has given what he wants, thinks is suitable to us. So this is where we need to concentrate on. And if we mold our life according to this principle that I just would like to see how I can help others and find happiness in this, then the contentment will make sure that we are not going to be out of bounds. So if we have ambitions, it will be ambition to see how we can legitimately fulfill the services that we can, but not in such a way that we just give up all the scruples and rules, because even as devotees, we should be following the rules of the land even more than others, because we are under scrutiny. But whatever is in store for us, whatever Krishna has as in Prabhupada's case, he gave him the eternal fame, which Prabhupada was not expecting, that was incidental for him. But nevertheless, that furthered the cause of Krishna Consciousness movement, made him the instrument. So our goal has to be that we need to be the invisible instruments in the hands of Guru and Krishna. And the operative word is both invisible and instrument. It's not enough to be instrument, it should also be an invisible instrument. Because if the invisible in the sense that we don't have to bury ourselves under the ground or deliberately do. There's nothing, it's a natural cause. It's just that we concentrate on our services, do what we can, whatever we can to please. It doesn't matter anybody knows or not. And there are a variety of things. So it's not also the service that counts, it's always the consciousness that counts. So no matter what we are doing, even taking on to the Krishna conscious principles and chanting our rounds is the greatest devotional service. So if we take this, then we are protected. Otherwise, for instance, if you take the attribute, we know how wealth can be misused if we don't have the guidance. Similarly, somebody is blessed with sharp intelligence. We have so many devotees who have been blessed with sharp intelligence, high IQ, and then they are humbling themselves and they do their best in the service of any various projects in the temple, etc. And this is all over the world. So you don't judge by our externals, you judge by what they are. But if you don't, then it could well be that we use the intelligence to further our own objectives and just go after material objects. Actually, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Ramananda Rai as to who is the most educated person, what is the highest form of education. And Ramananda Rai said that one who takes to devotional service of the Lord, that is the highest, is the most educated person. So the answer is that actually in that we use the attributes. So the attributes are not most important. They are like the zeros. Prabhupada gave the example that a zero has no value. So if someone has 10 crore rupees, that is everything's coming from Krishna. So if you have 1 0 or 2 zeros or 3 zeros, the zero is a zero, no value. But if you have 1, then the zero actually has values, because and the 1 is Krishna. So if you add Krishna to whatever we are doing, so if you have 1 0, it becomes 10. If you have 2 zeros, it is 100. 3 zeros become 1,000. So it's not the attribute, but it's the consciousness. And the consciousness of knowing who we are and what we want to do really makes everything very worthwhile. So, are there any questions? Any comments? Gaurang Prabhu would like to add on. If there are no comments, then we'll end here. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.